Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
Too much fun. Boom, you're up.
All right, well with that, hey everyone, welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a place where we cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of this very moment. And today is the last installation of our residency with Daniel Görtz, going on deep dives into different aspects of metamodern life. And today, I believe we are covering metamodern faith and religion. So this will go up on YouTube. So if you, we've got a question and answer session after the presentation. So if you want to start dropping questions at any point in the chat box, feel free to do that. If you want someone to ask the question for you, myself, then just say so in the chat and I'll read it for you since this will go up on YouTube. So with that, welcome Daniel. Thanks for coming out one last time.
Hello everyone. So this is the last of this series that has been going on in throughout October, these Mondays. I'm grateful for people showing up and participating in different ways. And grateful to you guys for having hosted these sessions. Today I don't have a PowerPoint presentation actually, so we're going to try to just speak live, and I'll also try to be a little bit shorter. So particularly a topic like faith and religion, and particularly co-created faith and religion and co-created new rituals makes more sense to approach yet more dialogically. So we've covered thus far aesthetics, we've covered and the arts, and we have argued that there are generator functions within each of these metamemes that you can, and that each generator function creates a greater variability of different artifacts and cultural expressions that a postmodern society, for instance, with a postmodern generator function at its core, will create more different kinds of artistry than a traditional pre-modern what I would call post-Faustian society. So you can take a look around medieval Europe and its art and its religious art and the paintings around Europe for several hundred years, and there's a resemblance between them. Whereas in the postmodern days, or with the advent of contemporary art, you can look at one particular artist. So and you can see that this particular artist is a Picasso or is Pollock or whatever your favorite example might be. That the number of fingerprints, the number of capabilities of what can be created, the depth of what can be created increases as society makes these leaps in complexity. And I also argued that metamodern metameme, this generator function at this developmental stage, creates an incredibly high creativity, so that art kind of breaks out of its box. It's no longer confined to the art seminars or the concept of art and so on, and that it breaks out of its confines and follows deep structures in reality, and mysterious structures of reality in science and the labs, in new religious practices and so on, and becomes kind of a driving force or a center of society at large, or of culture at large. So modernity encapsulated art, put it in a particular category, together with religion, together with science. These were different categories. And that was an incredibly powerful differentiation that happened. Postmodern critique of that stemmed particularly early on from the art scene, and from people with strong intuitions of what was to come. So it started breaking out of these categories and started playing with them and started making fun of them, poking scores at them. Now, metamodernism is when it breaks out of that cage, takes over life, and life itself is subdued to an artful, or no, not an artful, an artsy, playfulness, which at the same time accounts for a deep seriousness because the stakes are higher. So we're in this kind of double bind with the new metamodern god, approaching the core topic of today bit by bit. That on the one hand, we're crashing the planet. We have a global civilization that is likely to not work if it doesn't shift gears and shift its trajectory seriously. We also have decaying institutions, but it's not only that. On a very fundamental level, we see that all societies have broken down, or basically all societies have broken down sooner or later. Ours is a fast-moving, extra big society, and we notice that within our reach comes more and more existential risks. So we see that AI can disrupt things and destroy us, or nanotechnology, or biotech, or just haywire biohazards like the corona. And I mean, the list just goes on with things that can go wrong, and they come more and more into our reach, within our reach. And as creativity goes up, we have the cultural creativity goes up. Creation also means destruction, so destructivity also increases, meaning that we're entering a kind of strange place where we're, well, more and more virtual, more and more connected, more and more free in a deep sense, more and more together in some abstract sense at least, but at the same time with greater and greater destructive capacities, and with greater and greater risks. So we also looked at spirituality as a second during our second talk, and spirituality then I define particularly from going back to the Hanzi books and expanding a little bit on that. I defined it in terms of the highest subjective states, and particularly the deeper layers of phenomenological existence, that you go deeper into yourself and you notice that you get in touch with something more fundamental, which was nevertheless ever present. We particularly spoke about 4 such layers, which are present in integral theory and really all over the place in spiritual circles: the gross body, the subtle body, the causal body, the non-dual body. And I also underscored that these 4 bodies shouldn't be viewed as such. It's just a way of talking about it. They should be viewed as layers of phenomenological existence. So that more fundamentally, we tend to notice that that there's a background to whatever we're feeling, and we can identify with that background. And then there's a background to that, and then there's a background to that. And at the very end, there's just existence, there's just being, and there's just emergence in this big, deep sea of being. So people with spiritual depth tend to have traversed farther, consciously traversed farther back in these phenomenological layers. And that's also where you can pick up a lot of artistic intuitions. So there's a connection between the arts and their way of being prescient with spirituality. This spirituality is also connected to one of the main topics of our day and age, which is gender and sexuality and family formation, which needs to be reconstituted. And it's also one of the categories, the household or the family or the core, the nuclear family, which was also in many ways constituted as a particular zone or differentiated zone under modernity. So you have professional, political, and personal aspects of life, spheres of life, which work much more independently than before modernity. You can also add a fourth one, which is the one we're talking about today, the religious or perspectival. If you want a fourth P, you can say perspectival instead of religious. So what metamodernity does is not to reinvent each of these on their own. It doesn't reinvent the professional, the political, the personal, and the religious, each on their own. It reintegrates all of them. So modernity differentiated all of these things from traditional society in which they were undifferentiated, and which they still are in many parts of the world. And as such, it could bracket a lot of the naturally occurring corruption that was just ever present, just a part of life before. That your boss would also be your brother-in-law, would also be your cousin, who's also go to the same church and part of the same guild, and so on and so on. Whereas modernity says, hey, you can be this cozy stay-at-home dad while you're during the weekend, then you can go be this tough pro in the market, then you can go and demonstrate for whatever cause you want on your spare time, and you don't even have to tell your boss about it. And then, quite crucially, modernity also said, and sure, have your religion, have your faith, have your beliefs, but they're up to you. They're not part of the public realm. They're in the private realm. So you can be Christian if you want, but please don't come knocking on my door on a Friday evening and tell me about and ask me if I found Jesus. And the people who do that are kind of viewed as like you're breaking the deal, and most of them get the door slammed in their faces, right? So that's the kind of equilibrium we're starting from now. We're starting from the equilibrium of modernity, which is breaking down. It's breaking down on all of these fronts. Modernity did other differentiations. Modernity is the big differentiator. As we said, it differentiated religion from art, from science, from industry, from politics, all of which were non-differentiated prior to modernity. So it's kind of obvious in a way that we are looking at a new integration, reintegration of these issues, and that that these categories, as we think of them, are products of the 19th century. They all show up like art museums where artists have their exhibitions. It's a 19th century thing, and 20th century, of course. and on it goes. Like even the religions, they weren't defined as religions. Christianity, Buddhism, and so on. This was done in conference, an interfaith conference in the 19th century. So what we're looking at when we're looking at religion, religio, what binds all together, we're getting to kind of the core, or the faith, or the glue, the deeper glue or principle that that we need to glue our reality back together after we've picked it apart. And that's kind of what metamodern religion is and is going to try to do in the world. So first of all, it's not religion as we normally think of it. So we're not going to add one more. We're not going to say like, okay, thank you, Islam, Christianity, Bahrainism, and so on. Now here's a new faith, and this is how it works. It's going to resist the categories of modernity. It's going to resist with its limitations. So it's also faith and religion are coming back in a way, in a sense. They're coming out of the prison of the private realm to which it has been delegated for almost 200 years. So we're bringing religion back. At the same time, of course, we're not bringing any of the particular old religions back. We can still, I mean, there's a rich material there. You always pay a price for each new value meme, you know, or each new meta meme, or each new stage of development in society. And a terrible price was paid, of course, for modernity, namely that we lost of all of that sincere faith. We had other virtues back then, you know. We had being pious, being humble, all humility. I mean, things that purity, things that were pretty powerful psychological attractors and strong practices. We kind of lost to get to this new stage of modern religion. Now, you always pay a price, right? So what we're paying, the price we're paying for this, making this leap from modernity and its differentiation to metamodernity's reintegration of all of these topics, is that it's difficult to integrate. And when we try to integrate and we fail, which we inevitably do, things become pre, not post, meaning they become corrupt. So what happens when suddenly I'm a philosopher, and for a long while you could be just a philosopher, and you didn't have to be a theologian, and you didn't have to underpin it with a strong faith. Now these things are in contact with each other again and trying to be integrated. So here I am, a philosopher, a secular political philosopher, and a social scientist, and nevertheless I am driven by a revolutionary faith. And yes, I want to stop and talk about that revolutionary faith for a while, but that with this caveat before we go, the caveat being, the more we reintegrate, the more mistakes we can make. Nevertheless, if we don't reintegrate, we will continue to, our differentiation of these different spheres will imply a failure of integration of our agencies and our psychologies and our behaviors and our social systems and our politics. And we will continue to decay until our civilization falls apart. when we do try, well, and not just our civilization, the systems around it as well, when we do try to reintegrate, we always risk being the bad guys. We risk being totalitarians. Because when you integrate and you don't do it correctly, one part will conquer the other. So this is also why there is, which I keep coming back to, at this very moment in history, a very pressing and present risk of new totalitarianisms cropping up. And we're not going to necessarily notice or recognize them as such because they tend to be more subtle in the forms that they show up. So, okay, metamodern religion, metamodern faith. We lost faith with modernity. We had faith in progress, but we didn't have just faith, just Kierkegaardian, pure, I just believe, just for the heck of it, just because it's, well, you know, just because there is something higher, something awesome, something cool, and I can be guided by that. And we have to lose it. We had to lose it. We had to lose that kind of innocence. Now, can you reinvent innocence from a nihilistic Nietzschean foundation? And that's what we're trying to do. So, okay, God is dead, but other categories, it's not just like, okay, we killed God. That was the old pre-modern category or set of categories. You go on from there. Modernists believe in humanity, or the people, or the people's will. Rousseau thinks there's a people's will. Well, that's a construct. I've never seen the people, less than, you know, no more have I seen the people will anything particular. I just see a lot of different people with, which even aren't coherent as individual persons, right? So I don't even, so we kill off the people, we kill off the individual, and we have co-emergence. And we have co-creation, of course. Well, so there's a temptation there. Well, so there's this cosmic erotic process of becoming that drives all of this. You can ally with that. Oh, wait a minute, that's still, you know, so you still think you know where this thing is going? And that's pretty high horses to get up on, to think, hey, I'm allied with the universe evolving itself. No. Postmodernism means nobody knows. It means you are making this claim yourself for your own from your own epistemically limited perspective and for your own interests, and never deny that. Oh, okay. Also, I don't even get that. Well, so we've killed God, killed those other categories. Well, there's the truth. There's objective truth, beautiful objective truth. Well, but on the other hand, whose truth? And the truth always goes deeper, and it's always context dependent, it's never static, so you never reach it. There's only relative truth. Whenever we speak anything, whenever we describe reality, there's never a one-to-one description. So, and it also omits all questions of meaning and so on. Okay. So just, well, death, yeah. We're just left in a fairly dark place, which isn't such a bad place to start if you think about it. So we're left in nothing, and things just kind of happen, kind of emerge. If you do look at that, though, we do see within this nothing there is experience, and there are qualities, such as those within the higher states: love, joy, acceptance, the sense of enlightenment, and so on. And interestingly enough, when people touch upon these higher states, when people touch upon the non-dual states particularly, and the causal and non-dual states, when they have spiritual experiences, interestingly, their ontology will shift. So it's not always, but it's fairly rare that people who have these stronger spiritual experiences via psychedelics, but preferably perhaps via other means, such as your own practice of faith, your reality tends to feel less materialist. You tend to identify less with gross reality. You tend to identify more with the non-dual sea from which it all appears to emerge. So there appears to be that people who have strong spiritual experience turn this upside down. Now, that actually connects pretty well with what we just said. So there appears to be just pure emptiness from which things emerge. And there appears to be a truth claim to that the farther we go into our own experience and the farther we explore the farther reaches of the mind, etc., the more we tend to become both nihilistic and religious, both suspicious of any particular belief or paradigm, and more imbued with just blind faith. And the faith can be blind because it's not tied to any particular belief structure. Nevertheless, when we do that, so basically we start believing in just, I think reality is good rather than bad, which nevertheless translates to particular beliefs, because in empirical reality, what actually happens in the world, things might very well go very badly for myself or any other person I know. Hey, for all I know, I can get hit by a car tomorrow, and like no faith in the world's going to help me. I mean, there might very well be the great filter of civilizations. Who knows that within 100 years, they from where we're at now, somebody discovers that, hey, you can microwave something in a microwave oven and it's going to make the whole world explode. Just happened to be a discovery that's waiting around the corner, and at that moment when it's discovered, people just look at each other and we know we have 3 seconds left to live, and that's it. Who knows? Who knows? So we don't know if it's a dark world or if it's a light world empirically, but we do know that the low states exist, that there is an incredible seriousness of reality, and that the stakes are incredibly, incredibly high, and that it's no fucking joke. We also know that even hell freezes over, because whenever we come out of the low states, we always find that we came out of what appeared to be an illusion. We appeared to be stuck. We appeared to be in a rut. But when things open up and you see them clearly and with light and love, and you understand the truth about something, it tends to dissolve into something bigger. It tends to open up. So we also know that even though life feels incredibly cruel, and it is incredibly cruel, it is in the last instance a cosmic joke, and the joke's on us, and it's by us, and our fundamental awakening to it is that we laugh along. It's like, good one. Wow. Yeah, I almost killed myself there for 5 years, but It's just a joke. At the same time, of course, not just a joke. I mean, so there is a directionality to that. So it appears as though like we could have been in a universe where the more truth we find out about something, the worse it gets, you know? But that doesn't seem to be it. It appears as though we misunderstand things, and then we get in all these clusterfucks, and then things kind of clear when we get the real, when I really understand your perspective, I realize you weren't actually evil, and so on. So it appears as though the fabric of the universe itself is good. And it appears as though any truth claims I make about it are then just going to be little congealed crystallizations, like even a scientific truth and anything like that. There's still going to be belief structures in a sense. So that's the difference, I suppose, between metamodern faith and all the earlier religions, would be that the belief structures themselves are believed to be false. Meaning that, and this is where the headless God comes in, which I promise I talk about, that whereas, you know, Muhammad, he moves a mountain, he comes down, he's a prophet, and he's, you know, he's on a one-to-one basis with God, he's talked to man, and he knows all about what the truth. And then there it is, the universal truth. And of course, people do respond to it because he has found something profoundly universal for his day and age. Now people there believe that that universality is there. And if you go against that universality, you're blaspheming. You're going against the truth itself. And hey, if you go against the truth, you're going to fall off a cliff. We might as well stop you. Now, the metamodern God, because we started from pure emptiness, from, you know, the cruelest joke nihilism that we can think of, because we started from there, this is an anti-fragile God. We can kick him around, or her, or it, or I amness. It's just going to get stronger for it, you know? We're supposed to always, whenever, well, there's this old saying, if you see Buddha in the streets, go kill him. And that kind of translates to this stuff, right? That the point isn't any particular belief structure that we might have, it's the process itself of this profound skepticism. And this profound skepticism at its core, if you understand it deeply enough, you see that at the core of the skepticism, at the core of the cynicism, is nevertheless faith, is nevertheless, and you cannot remove it. That's also the thing. So nihilism was always fake. It never existed, not even in Nietzsche. It doesn't exist. And they will give themselves away the moment you look. Like, sooner or later, the nihilists will always say, like, wait a minute, that's not fair. Fair? You said, according to whom? According to what? And there aren't any nihilists. At the core of it is the faith. And we need to purify that faith and deepen that faith and just go deeper and deeper and kill our own gods, right? And so we're kind of reconstructing a couple of nuggets from religions here. We're reconstructing the enlightened one. The enlightened one, whenever you start believing in somebody being enlightened, go kill that figure. Go kill your own God, because it's not the real deal. It's in the process. It's in the truth seeking. Next one. We reconstruct Christianity. Okay. So what happens when you've killed God? Well, he comes back 3 days later, annoying as he is, because you're going to have a new thought based on wherever you are in that thought process or in that dialogue. and you're going to start believing in it until you realize what you're doing, and then you need to revolt and kill them again. So always remember, always on the way to the guillotine, the headless God, always on the way to the cross. So other reconstructions, the devil. So this actually goes much farther back than the Christianity, though. So is the devil real? Yeah. Actually, yeah. I mean, it's one of the things we were taught, like, oh, that's so silly. Maybe I believe in God, but who would believe in the devil? Well, so we do know that low states are there. We do know that we are going to try to uphold a false reality together, which doesn't go deep enough into authenticity and doesn't touch upon our faith. And we are going to act in bad faith vis-a-vis one another, and we know that sneaky shit is always present in our everyday interactions with each other. So basically, there's a lot of evil around, and of course, if you unpack the evil in the last instance, it's not actually evil. If you go into it and you resolve the trauma, you find the truth, you bust the bullshit, you understand what this thing was trying to protect, and so on. It was always trying to protect something smaller from like a smaller unit trying to protect itself vis-a-vis a bigger solidarity or a bigger system. Then you notice that there really is, in everyday life, a dark process that is ever present and which we always need to reveal. And if you follow that presence, or if you fall for it, you're gonna suffer, or others are gonna suffer. And that's by definition why it's evil. So you are going to hell if you follow the devil. All of these things are almost literally true. So, I mean, the religions, they didn't just make shit up, which is the common misconception of them in modernity. We can go a bit farther back. We always pay a price, right? You always pay a price for each of these developmental metamemetic stages, right? So if you look at when the post-Faustian, the traditional religions showed up, they tried to find one universal truth, and at the same time, if you go for the universal, you have to kind of give up the particular, and this is present in like Christianity, medieval Christianity. The good knight is pious. He's honorable, so he will give away himself to something bigger, right? Whereas in a Faustian culture, like the hero is a Thor figure, right? So it's just the toughest, and he's a warrior, and he's going to attack for no good reason, and that's that. So you're losing something, you're losing this particularity, this self-affirmativeness, this unapologetic will to power. You're losing when you try to instantiate the universal, which cares about all members of society and the equality of all and the universal truth. What happened there in that schism between the Faustian religions, like, for instance, to a large extent, the Indo-European polytheisms that existed from Greece to Germany to the Vikings and so on, with these, and you had similar ones in the Middle East, right? In this book, The Evolution of God by what's his name, Robert Wright, he even shows that that it's known that the warrior god Jahwe was actually the God that we inherited as eventually a universal God. So our loving God has originally been the correspondent of Thor, a war god, which is, by the way, why he won over all the other gods, because all the warring warrior people could beat the crap out of everybody else until there was only that god left. So what you lose in that step between Faustianism and post-Faustianism, going from these warrior religions to these universal peace religions, is this will to power. And in that schism, you create a new presence, like an undercurrent of your culture, and that is the occult and occultism. So from there on, there's always the temptation of like, why don't we go back to the other older religions? Why don't, like, well, maybe I can do a bit of voodoo magic after all, and maybe I can strike a deal with the devil. Maybe I can maybe I shouldn't be denying my sexuality and my powers and stuff. And I want to emphasize that, not because we're not going to talk about the history of religions, but of course, metamodern religion today, that metamodernism must reconstruct actually also Faustian religion or occultism, meaning that it must reconstruct. I just tried to reconstruct the devil and saying that's true, but at the same time, we must reconstruct Satanism or worship of the devil. We're always building a both-and religion, right? So we're never going to reach the truth about ourselves and kill our gods unless we kill our inhibitions, our hypocrisies, our wanting to control our darker selves. We need to be good Freudians, and we need to say yes to those more difficult and dangerous parts of life and existence, which is also kind of what we got into a little bit last time about the reconstruction of a benevolent patriarchy, that admitting some things that are difficult to admit about the genders and our relationships, but which are nevertheless difficult to attain. Which brings us into a more ritualistic kind of religion. So metamodernism at large is a name for the deeper tendencies of all of these different aspects of culture in culture and philosophy in the internet age. Metamodern religion, in a sense, or metamodern faith, in a sense, is the core of that, because it interconnects all of the other things on a spiritual embodied level, and it needs to create the practices for that, but not contained within a religion or a church, because it wouldn't fit in those categories. And if we try to fit it in those categories, it's going to break, and it's going to be a sick version of that. So what we are looking for instead is a kind of reinvention of rituals and religious practices. That can mean, of course, practices of meditation and yoga and contemplative prayer and many other things, and singing together or whatever people want to do. But particularly, it has to do with wanting to change the world, given that, and here we again reconstruct Zoroastrianism and stuff, or Manichaeism perhaps, that well, we're looking at a world which has utopian potentials, and it appears to be fundamentally good, but at the same time where there is great potential for evil, and the potential for disaster. And we want to make that more utopian thing happen for real. And we want to transform ourselves into agents which resonate with that potential and do not resonate with the first potential. And that's a non-personal thing. It's a transpersonal thing that we have to do together. And we have to create social practices to do so together successfully. So what we're looking for then is a kind of co-created ritualism, which can contain new philosophies, new cross-pollinations across sectors, and so on, and can kind of contain the energies, as it were, and cognitive and emotional and spiritual energies, which are necessary for metamodern emergence to occur. So there's also a sense of deliverance, but an ironic sense of deliverance, which is, by the way, why we have such figures as the post-saint, that it's a saint who always fails to be a saint, not because he's or she is too cool to be a saint, just because they fail. The saint is somebody tries to be saintly and then they fail, and that's the post-saint. We don't even believe in the saint, but in reality, people can relatively approach that ideal, and we can do that maybe together, or it can show up in certain occasions. So that we have the post-saint as an important figure in metamodern religion. We also have the ironic prophet, meaning that, so we're going to need Mohammeds and Jesuses and all the rest of them, but we will need to laugh at them and to partly disdain them. We will need to be partly disgusted by them. It's a prophet, but when you can piss at, and that's why it becomes sacred. So here again, the occult comes in. Like we have to integrate the occult. Like if you have a prophet, you can't criticize or touch, you know. And for this reason, I also think it makes sense to have fictional characters to a certain extent. Which, by the way, what do you think Jesus and the Buddha and Muhammad are? Do you think these are real people? To a certain extent, I'm sure, but they're 90% fiction. Anyway, the way people project on them, that's all fiction. So of course, why don't we just have fictional characters and own up to that? We need saints, we need prophets. We just need to make sure we know what we're doing, that we know they're saints, that we know that ultimately we're creating them, and we do need God. We just need to know he or she or it isn't real. Except we're still going to believe in it, except then we're going to bust our bullshit or bust bullshit of one another. So then we need religion, rituals to contain that. Prophet could be a community. Let me think about that for a moment. I wanted to say, so just ending up, what kind of, we're getting a sense of what kind of religion this is. It's a deeply nihilistic religion, which is nevertheless combined with genuine faith, which you then work very, very hard to purify. At the same time, you work very, very hard to just kill all stupid belief structures, including your own and the ones of one another. And then you have rituals to work on that. And it's a co-creative religion. It's an emergent religion. It's a religion of ongoing co-creation. A religion of activity, which does not believe then in the static truth out there, or static universality. The universality of it comes particularly from its rejection of all. Oh yeah. No, actually, here I would have been good with the PowerPoint, but what are good symbols? What kind of symbolism are we looking for? So again, science has clues. So you have those. There are a bunch of symbols that have become quite popular lately. Octopus is one. People get tattoos with octopuses and whatnot, and it's discussed in Netflix shows and books, of course. But the octopus, it's a alien intelligence. It's a mollusk. It's a big snail. And it's still intelligent, but it's a shapeshifter, and it is very, very, very fluid, and it can take many different forms. It can squeeze through, and it surprises us, and it's deep down. So I mean, you have more trivial examples like that are cropping up, but I think, like, if we imagine a metamodern church or something, right? It could also include mathematical structures. So this is important because one of the major problems of, let's say, developmental theory is, and a lot of people have this intuition, developmental theory, it tends to be stage-based, but the stages don't actually describe anything like a staircase or a ladder. They describe qualitative shifts into things that take quite different and alien properties at each shift or stage, right? And it doesn't look anything like a stage or like a ladder. So people tend to resist them for this reason. Particularly, and your stage of complexity, cognitive complexity, will incline you towards different kind of geometrical base structures in how you build your thoughts, right? So more complex people will often have, they don't have lines and squares in their head, they have donuts and complex topologies and Klein bottles and Mobius strips and phase spaces and Lorentz attractors which look like butterflies, and those are probably the kinds of faith. Those are likely the symbols also of a metamodern faith, that they help us look at reality in more linear ways and to approach our spirituality and our meaning making and our concept making in more different ways, right? In more complex ways, or non-linear ways. So who's going to make this happen? We see, so we're envisioning here a church, but it's not really a church because you shouldn't confine it within those. So it pops up here and there. It has arts and co-creation at the center. It has deep skepticism and nihilism at the center. Through this, it creates an implied or a faith which can never be faked, because the faith can only show up when you bust your own belief, and that's when you believe, right? And we see that this deeper cognitive or shared or spiritual structure becomes an attractor point for all the different changes that need to come into place for us to take the right turn as a society, or as a self-organizing living being. But who makes this happen? So in the class theory of metamodernism, we posit that that you have a new axis of class where there's a particular creative class of Triple H population, hippies, hackers, and hipsters, which play a particular role and which are in turn connected in many ways to the unemployed and the precariat, because and they then kind of share a kind of orthogonal axis vis-a-vis the middle and working classes, which are still married to the systems of modernity. Now, a fourth age within this class, we have said hipsters, hippies, and hackers, which are kind of self-explanatory. Hipsters are high on cultural capital. Hippies are good at meditation and spiritual practice. Hackers are good at the information economy. And if you combine all of those three, you tend to have metamodernists. Now, the fourth age, the quadruple age population, which is actually a more accurate term for this, are the Hermetics. And I noticed these after a while working with this stuff, that, wait a minute, there's some strange difference. First of all, the hippies seem to be too many. And second of all, they tend to always get in fights in two camps. And the Hermetics, this is called Hermetics as the occult practice of the Renaissance, where Hermeticism was when you were interested in alchemy, you were interested in all kinds of old symbols, you wanted to revisit the ancient classics, and you thought that this ancient Egyptian god, or which then had a Greek version which, of it, had given humanity some kind of primordial wisdom. In retrospect, I think we can safely say that they were sensing in Renaissance the attractor point of modernity. They understood that there was this big secret pulling humanity forward, and because the best example they could find of something that approached that was in antiquity and in ancient philosophy, they thought that it was hidden there, and there was like one pattern behind it all. They weren't all wrong. Now, in the same sense, Hermetics of today are the people who don't play with symbols as symbols, who they use symbols and rituals, for that matter, to grasp beyond what you can see with your mind, what you can see with your cognitive mind, that is. So they use symbols and symbolism and occultism and rituals and co-created rituals to push us a little bit beyond where we could normally be in terms of what we can discuss together, what we can understand together, what we can experience together, and so on. So it's symbolism and ritualism used as artifacts for enlightenment, or not for enlightenment, for exploration beyond our intellectual limitations, as it were, which is different from hippies. Hippies are good at somatic therapies. They're good at taking you on those retreats where you eat ayahuasca or something, but or drink ayahuasca. But it's different. It's a very different role, and they tend to express themselves quite differently. So the Hermetics have a particular role in inventing. They actually don't fit in very well in the other places, right? So you have the Metamodernists, they're working with the Silicon Valley types, or they're Burning Man people, or they do all sorts of these idealistic projects. And then you have Hermetics who do all of these nerdy symbol stuff, right? But there's a special role for them as well, namely that they can be the gathering point of metamodern religion and religiosity. Because they have the inherent drive to experiment with rituals and forms and so on, so that the rest of us can participate in it. There are some risks around that, of course. The Hermetics particularly are the ones who are, because they're occult leanings and leanings into esotericism, they're also more likely to fall into far-right stuff. Spiritual but not religious. So what about that? This will be my last point before I end. Spiritual but not religious, we want to turn it on its head. That is, if you buy modernities, religiosity is a private thing. The only religions that are there include belief structures which are patently false. Then it makes sense. Then you can say, well, I still have had spiritual experiences, or I believe those are possible, and I think those can be meaningful for how you redefine your relationship to life and existence. And I think these are really important and spiritual but not religious. Well, but metamodern religion, to be a religion, but well, we're talking a post-religion because we're breaking out of the boxes of modernity, right? It has to help you on a bad day. It has to bring what the religions brought. It has to bring faith and resolve in the face of a dark and meaningless life. So because we know that people vary on these states, up and down, lower and higher and lower states, subjective states, we know that people aren't going to be spiritual at all times, but you can be religious at all times. You can never lose your faith unless, of course, something happens to this part of your brain where you, well, yeah, where those things are stored. But even in the darkest hour, you can have your faith. And the more you kicked your faith around and pissed on it on a good day, the more robust it gets. And if you have a community that helps you shoot down your own faith and lynch your God to death every 3 days, then you have a pretty robust God. And you know he's coming back on Thursday. So we're not looking. So I want to kind of end this stupid religious, spiritual but not religious. In metamodern religion, we need to admit that it is a religion. We never got out of religion. Religion, we're going to link all things together. We're going to have faith. We're going to make sure this faith is the best possible, highest quality possible faith we can have, and the deepest and most embodied possible faith we can have. So the conclusion becomes religious but not spiritual. I think in the future, we will more and more, as our lives become harder in these times ahead, we'll need to be religious but not spiritual. And just on a spiritual day, we'll thank our lucky star for it. Okay. How about questions and stuff?
All right, thanks for that. So, I've got a few good questions here, and I think, Christian, you had a question. Would you like to ask it as a question, or was it more just a comment?
Sure. The one about the like grounding faith in the deities or made up. Yeah. I was just wondering, Daniel, that idea you presented about making up characters and having them be these symbolic grounds for faith. I know that that's possible, like with Jungian archetypes or Tibetan deities, that these symbolic entities can very effectively represent personal qualities, and you can feel into them and all that kind of thing. But when it comes to faith, I'm wondering if made up characters can effectively ground a sense of faith, especially because there's like a very deep emotional, relational aspect to faith, I would say. And I'm wondering how well a made up character can play that role. And if you have any examples of that happening effectively with a made up saint or whatever.
So, yeah, there you go. I think, I mean, the main example are all the present saints from Christianity and you know, all the lamas. It just kind of goes on. I mean, in a sense, we have to understand that, well, yeah, they're impressive, but they're not real, you know? And that's kind of cruel in a way. And it's kind of, you know, it's kind of just sounds a bit unromantic or so it sounds a bit cynical, I guess, to just say like, dude, Jesus ain't all that. But it's the truth, probably, you know. And you look around. So show me a guru that didn't dissolve once people come up the seams. Once people examined it, him or her more closely, and just given this experience, they were all made up either way. So I think the faithful thing to do is to say, well, we're going to face up to truth, and we're going to face the truth that our saints are made up, and then we're going to make up the awesome saints that we need. And in that sense, they're going to be more real, and they can't come apart at the seams because we made them and defined them as such. And the post-saint is a person who approaches that ideal, but isn't it. And I don't know. I think whenever you get like to a ton, like whenever you get to station or whenever you get to utopia in any sense, you know, whether it's a person, whether it's a place, whether it's a heaven or anything like that. I mean, yeah, we're not quite doing our job. We have a natural tendency to want to rest somewhere, you know, like, oh, if things were only like that, if people were only like this person, if I could only get close to this one, or if I could only understand what this person is saying. But reality doesn't appear to be that. Reality appears to be co-created love and tragedy, which is always eternally broken and always on its way. So, I mean, that's the only answer I have. I mean, it's like, yeah, it would be cool if we need a real person. We're just going to have to make them as real as we can. And that's, I guess, the difference. Like, people are going to ask, like, are you serious? Like, can you really believe in something you know is made up? And I think the metamodernist answer is, yeah, I can believe it because it's made up. Yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense. Do you want to respond, Christian?
Sure, I'll briefly respond. I gel a lot with what you're saying about the how you've set up the problem of these saints. But where my question is more about is the solution. And even though it kind of addresses the problem, I wonder if it's practical. Like once people say, okay, you know, they're not real, and I'm just going to have to accept that, do they still effectively ground one's sense of faith in a deep emotional way? And I would ask you personally, do you have like made up, you know, faith symbols in your life or saints and that's like doing a good job for you to ground your, you know, more spiritual aspirations or principles?
So, I mean, in terms of spiritual practice, I'm not that far ahead. So as a theorist, I can say, well, this is where it's going to have to go, because this is what makes sense. But on my own small little scale, I mean, there's Hanzi Freinacht. So Hanzi Freinacht is a philosopher, and he prophetically says what's going to happen in the world. Now people can have a bash at it, you know, and you're not allowed in modern life with the institutions and roles and stuff that are played here to do that. You can't say like, hey, here's a book I wrote, it's about everything and where we're going with reality and existence and society. And to me, that's a example of post-prophet, you know, that just comes in your life. And you know where I got the name Hanzi Freinacht from? Is my roleplay character in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. It was actually the name of a dog of a German woman I met in South France. In just this fact that comes into your life, and you can project all of that drive and power. Like, I am a philosopher. I live in the Alps, and man, I did live in the Alps, of course, but I mean, and I did philosophize, but there was a sincerity and striving and faith to it, which is attached particularly to the fact that you can go beyond the confines of normal roles, right? And also, I think, became more real in many people's lives than it would have been if me and my buddy would have said, hey, well, here we are, we blah, blah, blah. Which is interesting, because we were nevertheless more real than we would have been if we would just have come out of nowhere and presented the books or ideas from our own roles. So there's that. I'm not sure how far it extrapolates, but I just think on a fundamental sense, on a fundamental level, it just makes sense that it has to be this way, because whatever real object of worship we're gonna have, like, wow, this glass is fantastic, it's a sacred glass, it's a chalice, can't you see? Like, no, it's an IKEA glass, it says IKEA on it, and you're always going to find the IKEA thing sooner or later. You know, there's if you have accepted postmodern anti-essentialism, there's always going to be that moment when you run behind the curtains and you see the Wizard of Oz and you say, bad man. And he says, I'm not a bad man, I'm just a bad wizard. And yeah. So just on a fundamental level, I think it just sense making leads us there towards this kind of faith.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I have a better sense now of how you see the role of the made-up character. So thanks.
Awesome. So Peter had something that interestingly really tied in with this, but I'm not sure whether maybe it's already been covered. So Peter, is there anything you'd like to?
Yeah, I'll read my question if anything inspires you, Daniel. It was quite related to what you just said. So what are your thoughts on consciously turning yourself into a fiction? I recall the Nordic LARP scene, and maybe you're familiar with it. They have a concept called bleed. So you take on a character, and then the character's traits bleeds into your personality. And this could have negative effects. It could negatively bleed into your personality, or you can consciously use it for like therapeutic reasons. And then you gain the positive traits of the character you're adopting. And it sort of has this alchemic effect in changing your personality. Can it be used for, fateful purposes? And even just to speak personally on myself, now that I came out of the Stoic closet since COVID came online, it feels like my avatar in the spectacle is like this being projected on is actually making me become more virtuous to kind of live up to that. So it's having an interesting kind of effect there. So yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, social psychology, sociological social psychology, of course, has since a long time claimed that the self, and this really ties in with the whole Buddhist practice thing, and I mean that the self, that when you examine it, there's nobody home. You're always, it is socially defined, or I mean, of course, you have the self as in first-person experience, the emergence of things. But then I have to relate to you, if you're my parent, as it's the first person, I notice that there is a you or a you-ness in the universe, and then I notice you're relating to me, and then I notice that I am an object, and then I notice that this object is something in my mind, and I start identifying with it, and I start having a narrative around it, and attributing properties to it, and so on. So I mean, we're social animals, nothing new there. But this means that there's always a fictional aspect to everything that we do. Like, my name isn't actually Daniel. It's just a word. I'm just an animal. I'm just sitting here in a sense, you know, somebody just made that shit up. And yeah, and then we all go with it, right? Just to have reference point of reference. And if you go back to Hobbes and his theory of the sovereign, that Hobbes, of course, writing in the 1600s, and is one of the early political philosophers, and he says that the sovereign is defined as whoever is defined as the sovereign. So somebody says, I'm king. And if people believe him, he is king. If people say, no, actually, we're going to kill you with pitchforks, then you're not the king. And then sooner or later, people do say, we're going to kill you with pitchforks. And then you say, no, because my knights are going to trample you. And then if the knights do trample them, the rest of the pitchfork people go home and they say, okay, Daniel is king. So they believe you now, and now you are per definition the king. Now the same thing happens whenever we make a claim, any social claim. I come in a room and I say, I'm Daniel. And if you guys don't believe me, you guys say, no, you're not Daniel, you're Niels. Then I'm not Daniel because you don't believe me. And the same kind of goes for religion. And as we said, that the belief structure is the thin part of religion, and the faith part is the big part. And so to get the most robust faith, we have to be as cynical and cruel as possible to all of the beliefs, which is why we kill off all of the belief structures and do so repeatedly, right? So just seeing this mechanism that life is, you know, that there's this Shakespeare thing. Life is a play, all the men and women merely players, one man in his time plays many parts, something like that. And that, of course, becomes even more true whenever we make other truth claims, whenever we make truth claims about the self, or we make truth claims about the nature of reality, and so on. But those truth claims are then affect us, and that's the point. So the kind of religion that we're looking for optimizes for that process, whereby we create useful fictions which don't outlive their usefulness, and which then strengthen the faith, which is an experience, which goes back to spirituality part. So that we optimize for the experience of faith, which lasts even on a bad day, right? And that includes then, of course, our own roles and who am I, who are you, what is right or wrong, what is real or real, and so on. But all of these are ultimately fictions because we don't know ultimate reality, because the eyes are God belong to no one. And that's really what the death of God means. That with the entrance of postmodern insight in Nietzsche, he says God is dead, and what he maybe or probably really means is that there's no ultimate umpire, no objective reality which we can defer to. And in that sense, I mean, it's not just God in the sky, silly God is dead. It's like serious God is dead, like nobody's home, really. There's no objective reality, no ultimate umpire, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I don't have a follow-up question, just maybe a thought. Seems like it's an art form to create useful fiction, because the Hanzi Freinacht character, you know, it maps over to your skill set, your temperament, and whatnot. And so I can see you can be good at creating useful fictions and bad at it. And I'm curious how to cultivate that art form.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully the kind of like metamodern church, stupid term, but hopefully the networked congregation of people playing around can hold rituals which support that and keep us sane through the process. We didn't really talk about that part. We talked about it briefly, but we didn't touch about the part that you pay a psychological price, of course, for working harder. And these more generative religions, right?
So that makes me think of Rob's earlier question might have some tie-in with this. Rob, are you still here?
Yeah. So hearing you discuss the way that religious claims have been almost literally true, it sounds like there's a principle by which metamodernism retrieves the religious truths that modernism rejected. So it seems to have something to do with their evolutionary mimetic fitness and something to do with their psychological utility. But I wanted to hear you say more about the principle that's used to kind of retrieve and integrate those pre-modern claims, and like, how do you sort those?
So very, 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 very good. First of all, I don't know. You just kind of notice that, wait a minute, this is true in that sense. But that being said, there's more to say about it. First of all, if we apply an evolutionary lens to the religions and draw them out over history, there's a clear pattern. I mean, looking at let's take Manichaeism, which is very early, or Zoroastrianism, and compare it to Sikhism. So if you look at Sikhism, well, there are 10 gurus. It's about, well, it sounds a lot like. There's a lot of modernity in there. There's a universality. There's the same God in Hinduism and in Islam. There's a rejection of particularities of faith. There's an emphasis on own experience and your own wisdom and growth and individuality to that. I'm sure others who know this better can come up with more examples, but I mean, it's clear that this is a religion that is created on the eve of modernity, right? Or Bahrainism is created in modern times, or New Thought is created in modern times, and so is, of course, New Age religion. Protestantism also on the eve or at the onset of modernity. It has all these things. It gets rid of the saints. It gets rid of a lot of authority. It places things back in individual faith, individual responsibility. It aligns with intersubjectivity, that you and I can have a theological discussion and say whether or not this is a good way to follow the Bible or not. So this development and metamemetic development is obviously visible throughout. Now, what there's a bad way to do the reconstruction, and this was what Wilbur warned about when he talked about Joseph Campbell and stuff. That, and I mean, I sometimes get too sentimental, so I do this too. That I'll look at what they're saying in Vipassana, for instance, and it's 2,500 years old Theravadan Buddhism, and it's pretty basic in its philosophical assumptions. And I'll sit there and I'll like, that's interesting, and I'll interpret it. I'll reinterpret it in a, I guess you could say, a metamodern framework. I'll do it. I'll be very gracious with it. Getting out of there, talking to the other people, you notice how literally a lot of them have taken a lot of these ideas, and they literally think, well, so with the mind, when you sleep, you rest your body and your mind. So you can exchange sleep for just resting and meditating, because then you're resting your body and your mind, which is just patently false. But they will literally believe it. Whereas, well, I thought they meant something else a little bit, right? So the bad way to do it, the Joseph Campbell way to do it, is you retrieve stuff and you kind of excuse the developmental irregularities which don't make sense in your time, right? And then you kind of get a somewhat too naive worldview and a too gracious view of religions and an uncritical view. Now, that being said, what Richard Dawkins and all of those people do, and the new atheists do, they just attack religion, and they think reality starts at modernity, and before that people were just stupid, and people need to stop being stupid, and these ideas are putting dumb thoughts in their heads. What is well, that doesn't hold up, because a lot of the things, if you look at what they're the existential core of what's being said, if you remove all belief structures and you just look at what is the point, a lot of them, these things will be profoundly true almost at the 1 + 1 = 2 mathematical level. So for instance, Buddhism says sin is a mistake. It's when you don't have knowledge about the world, and what you do does not give you desirable consequences. Well, is that true or not? Yes, it's true. Christianity says in the Sermon on the Mount, look, if you're forgiven, you're forgiven. It means that even if you killed a bus of children yesterday, if you really, 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 really regret it, and you're no longer that person, and you made amends, then you're okay. Because per definition, that's true, right? Like, because there is no soul, nobody's home. Well, you were a bad person yesterday. Yes, you were. That was really bad. Don't kill a bus of children. But now you're doing fine, and you're a kind person. Then per definition, you're kind. And there's no reason to attach anything particular to badness to your soul. Then per definition, yeah, then you are forgiven, right? I mean, all of those things that are true no matter what, right? So it doesn't have anything with Jesus walking on water or anything like that. But when you draw out what's the point of what's being said, then that can be true. Then if you want to play with one step farther, you can go with things like, okay, Muhammad moves a mountain. Is that true? Well, well, what it really says is that, if you go for the universal truth and you disregard your particularities of perspective, you can make bigger things happen because you are moving universal things and things that, because you're dealing with universal qualities, for instance. So, I mean, you can stretch it a little bit farther like that. In that sense, you can reconstruct miracles as well. So, okay, yeah, Jesus, he can feed a lot of people with just fish and stuff. Well, what it says is, if you're really charitable, life tends to create abundance. Yeah, that's true. So it depends on how far you want to stretch it. I suggest we stop at the hard existential ones, like, yeah, per definition, forgiveness is real. And if you forgive, you are freed. That's true. That's universally true, you know? Yeah, and on it goes. We can retrieve others from other religions, right?
Any follow-up,
Rob? Yeah, so I guess I would say this doesn't sound altogether different from the modernist view of some of these religions, which is their objection is, well, then why would we need religion at all? Don't we just know that forgiveness is good and we can move on? So like answering that with a metamodernist perspective, it sounds like is a bit more of a dance between like the useful fiction and the sort of modernist realism. How would you, I don't know, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, again, now you're being charitable to the modernists. And most modernists I would talk to, they just say, no, religion is stupid. Stop listening to it, you know? They wouldn't say that. They just say Jesus is not good. He says that he's God himself, and that anybody's going to hell if they don't particularly follow him. And whoever believes this needs to go take a long look in the mirror and figure their life out. You know, that's more accurately what I hear them saying. But even so, if we do take the gracious view of modernists, and they will say, yes, forgiveness is universally true. It's like, okay, but then point me to another philosophy which emerged under modernity, which says the same thing, and it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is that, as we said earlier, at every stage, you pay a terrible price for the new freedom gained, right? And what you gained was freedom, independence, dignity of a certain kind, but you lost piousness, faith, humility before a universality, this service, and a set pathway which creates a scaffolding for your practice, right? You lost all of those things. So we're going to have to charge the modernists with, like, okay, sure, you can throw away the religions as long as you give me all those other things back. And of course they can't. And they're like, yeah, we can be socialists. Like,
all right. Aditya, you had a question about communication.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel, for all your work. Really appreciate you. Yeah, I wanted to think about the hermetics and the kind of goal, if there is one, of a metamodern religion. So it seems like it's based on the sincere belief that there is suffering, and maybe there's many other sincere beliefs. But it feels like similar to the complexity, communicating across complexities. It seems like there can also be a flattening across subjective states, or integrated wisdom from higher subjective states, communicating with the masses, let's say. So I'm curious, what's the rational goal if we accept that? Is it a sort of marketing like come to my ayahuasca event, experience higher states. They're really good. I promise they're not so bad. Or is the language itself potentially inducing either is it psychoactive? Is it inducing higher states? Should we think about it from that perspective, or is it conveying the embodied wisdom? So how do we think about that? Or is it just marketing? And that's good enough because it's eventually pointed towards reducing suffering.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for your supportive comment first, but that's a hard question. I think, and so I'll just give you the politics answer. I actually don't think this through in terms of religion. So the politics answer is that we write in the second Hanzi book, Nordic Ideology, we write that the opposite of populism is political metamodernism. So populism tries to be for the masses, but does so by going to the lowest common denominator. Well, I don't want Arabs in Sweden. They make fires in their gardens here in residential area, and they do other crazy stuff that you're not supposed to be doing in Sweden. Well, a good portion of people will feel that way, and they'll join the populist party or vote for them. But it's a simple background thing, right? And religions are going to be pop most of the time, right? And metamodern politics doesn't relate as an alternative to the political ideologies and parties. It's just not just one more. It tends to insert itself as a kind of developmental axis or fulcrum point for the others, which imbues them with other interesting things going on, right? And so from a developmental viewpoint, metamodernists don't tend to be for or against, I don't know, Islam. It's like, why would you want to be against Islam? If you look at a Pomo Islam, they're just like a Pomo Christian. If you look at a modernist Muslim, they tend to be like a modernist Christian. So most of all, we tend to care about these developmental traits, right? And this same goes, I suppose, for this for the religions, that creating small networks where interesting stuff happens, and we together support each other in developing a culture and shared understanding across the board, which supports us spiritually and emotionally and socially to work for a metamodern world, which achieves relative utopia and in that sense is a salvation. That's good enough. So but at the same time, it's not secret. This also goes back to the politics part. In the politics, it's an open conspiracy. In the same way here, you have openness to terrorism. It's obvious now for everyone, but there's nothing secret going on. We're not killing cats or anything. So at the same time, you can just create all of these different rituals, know that they're not for the masses, but imbue key agents, including perhaps of different religions, or more or less, I suppose, ignoring the other religions. And just the fact of having the spiritual technologies for the people who can or spiritual and religious technologies for the people who can really make a difference as a network around the world, then that's good enough, I think. And given that there are developmental traits which will attract you to different religions, most people won't be attracted to metamodern religion. They're like, so it's not even a religion. No, we broke up that categorization of reality. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that would be. I guess it's a bit of a boring answer that we can't do so much with it, except if we can even create a metamodern faith among the people who are naturally drawn to it and keep it healthy. I think that's awesome enough, right?
Any follow-up?
Maybe just the way I capture it is kind of creating an oasis that maybe works for a subgroup of people. And maybe that's, and it's maybe the opposite of the modernity's value of scaling, marketing. It's sort of create a small, as you said, relative utopia, and maybe touch these people for the limited few for which it could work. Like no dreams of it being sort of like a global single movement like the modern, but a humility in that, yeah, it works for these 20 people that live together and they're touched, and maybe the people that visit, but it's not, and maybe the networks that this network touches, but it's not necessarily more ambitious than that.
Well, I'd probably go more divisions than being in a collective 20 people. Not like that. I mean, a small layer across the world, tens of thousands of people maybe. But hey, given the co-created nature, right? So, well, I instantly notice qualities about you, which I probably can learn a lot from. So how do you even scale that, right? We're going to co-create, right? So it has to be, well, so people have to have the value, have to come in the door with having an embodied value of co-creation, emergence, complexity, wanting to explore depth. And then there's the natural division between, as we talked about earlier in the former talk, between people who have more spiritual experience of life and those who don't. And metamodernism, viewed then as theology or faith, tries to marry two distinct kind of people, prickly and wobbly people, or whatever you want to call it. That yeah, so I was just watching this video that somebody shared of a new agey woman, and she looks at the camera and she says, "There's just oneness," and you can see, there's that presence, there's a depth in her eyes, and this is a high depth, high state person, and just everything about her screams it. There's a musicality, way of moving, blah blah blah. At the same time, there are people who are high in complexity, but not so high on depth. The depth people tend to not entirely grasp more complexity, and they tend to believe a lot of stupid things. The complexity people tend to be reductionist and kind of miss the point of life and existence. So if we can even marry those two things within what I think hermeneutics can create, within new porous and fast evolving institutions which come and go and blink like this, right, all around the place, and build collective experience. And then that, I mean, if we can do that, that's huge. So I wouldn't say it's small, or that the ambitions are small. I just say that if we look at this, it just doesn't make sense. Like, what exactly would we say? Like, so we show up around this place and like, yeah, like, have you thought of it? I mean, proselyting seems to be obsolete, right? I know. Yeah, please go there.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm just wondering if you have time for one or two more questions.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's see. Ryan Campbell had an interesting question. I wonder if you have something to speak to about it. Ryan, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here. This has been really fun. I've only got to listen to your last two, but they've been really fun. So this is kind of bridging some themes from the last talk that you gave with this one. And so I'm curious to hear you speak about your idea of gender reconstitution within the model of benevolent patriarchy that you described last time, and its relationship to this idea of metamodern religious structure and ritual. I'm reminded of the D.H. Lawrence short story, The Man Who Died, where Jesus comes back from the dead as a broken man who finds reconstitution and wholeness by playing out the myth of Osiris and Isis with a temple priestess. Also very curious very curious about what you consider the criteria for metamodern post-ritual integration in general. So thanks. You can take either of those or neither of those.
Second question. Thanks, Ryan. I actually, so there's some things that kind of on the rim of my mind here, which I have been thinking about over the last few days. So I'm actually glad you brought it up. And things that weren't really made explicit in the last talk. If we do think about the reconstruction of a benevolent patriarchy, we noticed that there were several steps for this to occur. We noticed that this appears to be something that happens only when things are getting very, 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 very sensitive and very, very healthy in a very deep sense. I mean, you can just put in a little bit of trauma in the wrong place and boom, everybody just, everything just implodes basically for the relationship and for the people involved. And a reminder is that, I mean, we first have the emergence of the benevolent patriarchy or matriarchy, which is more hierarchical, a sharper or steeper hierarchy than the benevolent patriarchy. And the benevolent patriarchy kind of plays on the foundation of the benevolent matriarchy. And as we also said, the fundamental bitterness of gender in our day and age, which we called gender antagonism, is that people feel let down by the benevolent patriarchy and the benevolent matriarchy and the benevolent patriarchy. Particularly, guys who feel let down by the benevolent matriarchy feel that mom is bad and that you have to destroy the feminine in the world, and they go fascist. That's all. And it goes again and again. You know, look at all the fascist guys. Not one of them will be in love with women and womanhood, and all of them will be angry with mom. It's just a fact, you know. And then if you act benevolent patriarchy on that and the betrayals of that patriarchy, there you have the criminals among the guys. You know, did you ever watch that show or that TV that was on a while ago where they're in a prison and they're doing therapy and group therapy with a bunch of, you know, tough guys, and daddy issues are all over the place, really. So there are these breaches in this fundamental psychological composition of us. We're angry at mom, we're angry at dad. These cracks show up very easily because life is difficult and it's difficult to be a parent. So what a metamodern religion can do is create, and again, we said it before, the family also is broken into new categories. So we have said 5 new forms of family. What I didn't mention last time is that we also have the metamodernist meta family, meaning and you said something, Aditya, about a group of 20. And that's more like the meta family. It's a new category that people can even, not have a normal family and just have the meta family and just be friends with people who have similar values and correspond at the same resonate at the same on the same frequency, and then have different strengths and so on, and weaknesses, and support each other in this political, religious, professional adventure, which also becomes also becomes family related, not least when people start having, sexual intercourse and so on. As these parts are reintegrated, there emerges a category which is the meta family, and Metamodern religion and the meta family appear to be two sides of the same coin almost. The home of this Metamodern religion is the meta family. The meta family, at the same time, needs a glue that is not the old family, and that's kind of this worldview or this faith. But this faith is so abstract, or so that it can span across all of these 4 different populations: the hippies, the hackers, the hipsters, and the hermetics. Now, then looking at benevolent patriarchy again and matriarchy again, playing with, so supporting those 2 forces, those 2 psychological forces, which you support by means primarily of perspective taking and addressing trauma, which Chuck is also very interested in. I see my friend Chuck is here.
Hi, Daniel. I just have to say hi, man.
Yeah, hey, buddy. That he or what we look at there is creating playful practice of patriarchy, matriarchy, which means brotherhood and sisterhood, where we support each other to be stronger men and more powerful women. So this is also a tendency that you see today in the post-feminist space and so on. People got tired of tearing down the genders, and now there's the manosphere, and there are Nordic women's gatherings and so on, and they're doing all these rituals, and they're trying to reground the feminine and the masculine and all of that stuff. These are important elements which need to be reconstituted in a playful manner within the rituals. There's a connection there quite clearly. We see that there's a strong dialectic. We need to play with that. We need a place, a safe space to play with it. We need people who support each other in that. We need and doing that, then the meta family supports the normal family, so to speak, so that these things can happen.
Awesome. Well, we seem to be nearing the top of the hour, so I guess we'll close it out now. Thank you so much, Daniel, for coming and giving us this extended dive into new material for us. Is there anything you'd like to say to close out?
So for me, well, I just want to say that I recognize there are a lot of very interesting comments and questions in the chat, and others I'm sure that you have been seeing, Laura, that I haven't maybe. So I just want to acknowledge all that and say that I love all of the questions and the comments. I see somebody, if I'm not reading entirely wrong, says he or she had to go because it's too provocative. That's nice. No, so I just I just want to recognize that if your question hasn't been brought up, well, please know it's still super interesting, and we'll try to find some time together at some point and connect around these things.
That would be awesome. So with that, this is the end of the October residency for Daniel Görtz. So we much appreciate your time here. And yeah, later today, I just want to plug ContraPoints. Natalie Wynn from ContraPoints is coming in. I'm going to drop the RSVP link into the chat. So if you want to hear about sex, drugs, and social justice with a former philosopher, video essayist, join us later today. And with that, thank you all so much for coming and joining us. Really appreciate all the lively chat and questions, as Daniel said. See you again soon.